My name is Richard Donovan. I'm 61 years old, a widower, and I live in a quiet neighborhood in Austin, Texas. I've worked as an operations manager at a construction supply company for nearly 25 years. Raised two children, Tyler, my son, who just turned 33, and Amanda, my 29-year-old daughter, and spent most of my adult life making sure they never had to struggle the way I did after my wife passed away when they were still teenagers. Last Monday, I received an email that changed everything. But before I tell you what happened and how one email turned my world upside down, I want to ask you something. If this story resonates with you, hit that subscribe button and leave a comment about where you're watching from. Your support helps stories like mine reach people who might be going through the same thing. And trust me, you'll want to hear how this unfolds. It was from Jessica, Tyler's fiancée, my future daughter-in-law. No subject line, just her name sitting in my inbox like a ticking bomb. I actually smiled before opening it, thinking maybe it was a quick update or a sweet note before their big day. We had just spoken about their wedding plans a few weeks ago over dinner at their place. I had already contributed $70,000 to help them book the venue, secure a photographer, and reserve the florist Jessica had loved since college. I remember how excited she seemed when she showed me the mock-ups, how Tyler squeezed her hand and looked at me with gratitude in his eyes. But when I opened that email, the smile vanished from my face. Richard, the email started. Not Dad, not Dear Richard, just Richard like a label on a file folder. Jessica explained that she, along with Tyler and her family, had finalized a guest list for the ceremony in Scottsdale, Arizona. And after much thought and careful consideration, they decided it was best for me to watch the wedding via live stream, not in person. She added that her mother was particular about the guest count and wanted to keep things intimate, just close family and friends. At the end, she included a line that felt like salt poured directly into an open wound. If you want to be a part of it, you can watch through the Zoom link we've created. Should be just like being there. LOL. I stared at that screen for what felt like an eternity. My morning coffee grew cold in the mug beside my laptop. My hands didn't tremble. I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything or curse. Something inside me just quietly shifted, like the ground had cracked open beneath my feet. But I was still somehow standing. I replied with just 4 words. Sure, enjoy your big day. No emotion, no argument, no explanation, just a quiet withdrawal. And I knew deep down in my gut that those 4 simple words would echo louder than any scream or angry rant ever could. I didn't want to fight. I didn't want tears or drama. I wanted clarity. I wanted the silence to speak for itself, to say everything I couldn't put into words. I closed the laptop, finished my now cold coffee in one bitter gulp, and got ready for work like it was any other Monday morning. But it wasn't. That was the day I stopped pretending that my sacrifices meant anything to my son or his fiancée. That was the day everything began to change. The drive to the office that morning was eerily quiet. Texas early spring air still held morning chill, but I barely noticed it as I drove through familiar streets on autopilot. My mind kept circling back to the same question, playing it over and over like a broken record. How did we get here? How did I become someone who wasn't even worth a seat at my own son's wedding? I've spent 25 years working at Harrison Construction Supply. It's not glamorous work, not the kind of thing you brag about at parties, but it's stable and dependable. And stability was exactly what I needed after my wife Sarah died suddenly from an aneurysm when the kids were still teenagers, still learning how to navigate the world. I remember standing in front of our old washing machine the week after a funeral, bills spread across the kitchen counter like casualties of war, trying to figure out how to pay for both groceries and Tyler's upcoming college deposit. The numbers didn't add up. They never did back then. Back in those dark days, I didn't think twice about giving up my weekends, my hobbies, my life really. I took every extra shift they'd give me at the company, worked overtime until my back ached and my eyes burned, canceled the fishing trips I'd been planning with my buddies, skipped my own birthdays like they didn't matter. I told myself over and over, there'd be time for me later, time to rest, time to live. There never was. Every single penny I managed to save, every dollar I squeezed from our tight budget, went straight to Tyler and Amanda. When Tyler changed his major twice in college and needed extra credits that weren't covered by his scholarship, I paid without a second thought. When he moved clear across the country for a short-lived job in Seattle that he swore was his big break, I covered his apartment deposit and his plane ticket, even though I knew deep down it probably wouldn't work out. When he cried his way through a second major breakup at 27, showing up at my door at midnight looking like a ghost, I flew out to Seattle the next morning, held him while he sobbed, and made him coffee in that cramped apartment that didn't feel like home to either of us. When Amanda wanted to buy a condo with her boyfriend Marcus, I didn't hesitate to co-sign the mortgage even though my own credit was stretched thin, and I wrote that first $10,000 check without even blinking. I never kept score. I never tallied up what I'd given or what I'd sacrificed. That's what fathers do, right? That's what love looks like. You give until there's nothing left to give, and then somehow you find a way to give more. But that email from Jessica made me feel like a transaction that had run its course. Like I had been useful for a certain period of time, and now I wasn't needed anymore. Like I had a shelf life stamped somewhere on my soul, and we'd finally reached the expiration date. Like I was a credit card that had finally been maxed out. Back at the office, I settled into my desk and tried to focus on the stack of inventory reports waiting for me. My boss Steven stopped by my desk around 9:30, coffee in hand. He's one of those rare men who actually remembers birthdays and how you take your coffee, who asks about your weekend and genuinely listens to the answer. He noticed something was off right away, could probably read it all over my face. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he said, setting a fresh latte from the coffee shop downstairs on my desk, still steaming. I wanted to tell him everything. I wanted to say my future daughter-in-law just disinvited me from my own sons when like I was some distant acquaintance they barely knew. But instead I forced what I hoped looked like a normal smile and said I hadn't slept well, bad dreams. He didn't push for more details, just squeezed my shoulder and walked away. That small act of simple human kindness, the coffee, the silence, the gentle touch on my shoulder nearly broke me right there at my desk. After all the chaos and noise in my head that morning, all the angry thoughts racing in circles, it reminded me that I still existed. Around lunchtime, my phone started buzzing on my desk like an angry wasp. Tyler. His name lit up my screen like a spotlight I desperately didn't want. Voicemails piling up one after another. Text messages coming through rapid fire. "Dad, please answer. We need to talk about this. This isn't funny. Call me back right now." I didn't listen to any of them. Not yet. Not when I could barely think straight. I just sat there in my quiet office, sipping my latte slowly, and thought to myself, maybe it's time to stop being the one who always answers immediately, who drops everything the second they call. Maybe it's time to stop playing a supporting role in someone else's story when they won't even let me stand in the audience, much less on the stage. That afternoon, sitting there at my desk with the afternoon sun streaming through the window, I made a decision that would shift the ground beneath all of us, that would change the trajectory of everything. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg for my rightful place at my son's wedding. I was going to do something far more powerful, something they'd never expect from dependable, always there when you need him Richard. I was going to act. After work. Instead of heading straight home like I usually did, I drove to Texas Regional Bank downtown, a few blocks down from the office. Marcus Chun, the branch manager, had helped me with everything over the years, from setting up college funds for both kids when they were little to adjusting my retirement contributions when things got tight. He'd walk me through refinancing my mortgage after Sarah died, helped me navigate the financial chaos of sudden widowhood. He always greeted me by name with genuine warmth. "Mr. Donovan." He smiled broadly, standing up from behind his desk to shake my hand firmly. "Good to see you. What can I do for you today?" I sat down in the leather chair across from him and placed my briefcase carefully on the floor beside me. My voice came out calm, maybe too calm, like I was discussing the weather. "I need to cancel a wire transfer," I said plainly. He blinked twice, clearly surprised. "Which transfer would that be?" "The one scheduled to go to the Scottsdale venue," I replied. "The $50,000 transfer." His fingers paused over his keyboard. "There may be a cancellation fee depending on the timing," he said carefully, professionally. "May I ask what's changed?" "The circumstances have evolved. I replied without elaborating, without giving him the whole messy story. He typed something into his computer, eyes scanning the screen. Then he looked back up at me with something like relief in his eyes. "You're actually in luck, Mr. Donovan. It hasn't processed yet. It's scheduled to go through tomorrow morning. First thing." He paused, and I could see the conflict on his face, the branch manager wrestling with a concerned friend. "Are you absolutely certain about this? $50,000 is a very significant amount of money." "I'm certain," I said, and I was more certain than I'd been about anything in a long time. $50,000. That was the amount I had planned to transfer next week, on top of the $70,000 already spent and gone. $120,000 total for a wedding I wasn't even allowed to attend in person, where I'd be watching my own son get married through a computer screen, like some stranger tuning into a public broadcast. I signed all the necessary cancellation forms with steady hands, answered all of Marcus's required questions, and walked out of that bank without looking back, without a single second thought or moment of doubt. By the time I pulled into my driveway at home, the sun was starting to set, and there were 9 missed calls from Tyler, 2 from Amanda, and 3 text messages I couldn't bring myself to read yet. One voicemail came through just as I was unlocking my front door. Tyler's voice tight with panic. "Dad, please don't do this. Please just call me back. We can talk about this." I turned off my phone completely, powered it down, and set it on the kitchen counter like it was something toxic I needed distance from. In the kitchen, I reached up to the top shelf where I kept the good stuff and pulled down the bottle of bourbon I'd been saving for Thanksgiving. I hadn't opened it back then, even though I bought it specifically for the holiday. Tyler was supposed to come visit, spend a long weekend with his old man, maybe watch some football, and eat too much turkey. But he'd canceled last minute, sent me a text 2 days before saying something had come up at work. So, sorry, maybe Christmas. I poured myself 2 fingers of bourbon into a heavy crystal glass Sarah had loved, took it out to the back porch, and sat down in the old wooden chair that creaked under my weight. I sat there watching the sun sink lower, painting the Texas sky in shades of orange and purple. Birds chirped their evening songs in trees. A neighbor's dog barked rhythmically somewhere down the street. Everything felt surreal, like I was watching my life from outside my own body. And then the memories started coming, washing over me in relentless waves I couldn't hold back. All the birthdays I'd planned alone after Sarah died, try and make them special for 2 kids who were drowning in grief. All the holiday dinners where I cooked for 3 and pretended I didn't notice the empty chair at the table where Sarah should have been sitting. All the school plays and soccer games where I was the only parent sitting alone in the bleachers, clapping louder than anyone else to make up for the missing mother. All the small daily sacrifices that nobody ever noticed or acknowledged. The new truck I didn't buy even though mine was falling apart. Keeping that old Chevy running for 3 extra years on duct tape and prayer. The car I drove for 14 years, watching all my colleagues upgrade while I made do with what I had. The vacation to Alaska I kept postponing year after year, telling myself next summer, always next summer, until next summer became a decade of next summers that never came. I thought about Jessica's mother, a woman I'd met exactly 3 times my entire life. A woman who barely knew Tyler, who hadn't been there for any of the hard years, the grief-stricken nights, the struggles to keep him fed and clothed and in college. Yet somehow her opinion about guest lists and intimate atmospheres carried more weight than mine, more weight than the father who had carried Tyler through every single hard season of his life, since he was 14 years old. I thought about the way Jessica had signed off her email with LOL, like watching your own son's wedding through a screen was some kind of inside joke we all shared, something amusing instead of devastating. And finally, for maybe the first time in 25 years, I thought about myself, not as Tyler's father or Amanda's dad, not as Sarah's widower, but just as Richard, as a man, a human being with his own needs and wants and limits. What did I actually want from life at this point? Peace, dignity, some small corner of respect. That night, around 9 o'clock, my doorbell rang sharp and insistent. I thought seriously about ignoring it, about sitting there in the dark and pretending I wasn't home. But curiosity got the better of me, and some small part of me that still wanted to believe this could somehow be fixed. It was Amanda, still in her work clothes, her blazer wrinkled and her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She looked uncomfortable and stressed, holding her phone in one hand like a weapon she might need. "Dad," she said, stepping inside before I could even speak or invite her in. "Why aren't you answering your phone? Tyler's absolutely freaking out. He's been calling me every 10 minutes. I shut the door calmly behind her, deliberately slow. "Hello to you too, sweetheart." She sighed heavily, already pacing back and forth across my living room floor, like a caged animal. "He says you're not coming to the wedding now, that you're being difficult and making everything harder than it needs to be." I actually laughed out loud at that, a sharp bark of a laugh that surprised even me. "Difficult?" I repeated. "For not attending a wedding I was specifically uninvited from? For staying home like they asked me to?" She shifted her weight uncomfortably from foot to foot, clearly not wanting to be here having this conversation. "Jessica's parents are footing most of the bill, Dad. You know how traditional they are about these things, about family and protocol, and all that stuff." I raised my eyebrows at her, feeling something cold and hard settling in my chest. "Traditional," I said flatly. "I already paid $70,000. Amanda, $70,000. I was about to give them $50,000 more on top of that. That's not tradition. That's extortion. That's treating me like a bank account instead of a human being." She froze mid-step, her face going pale. "Wait," she said slowly. "You were sending another $50,000? I corrected, taking a deliberate sip of my bourbon. Past tense. But not anymore. Amanda's face went completely white, all the color draining out of it. "Dad," she whispered, "they're counting on that money. The venue balance, the catering final payment, the band deposit, the flowers, all of it. Not my problem anymore." I said evenly, calmly, like we were discussing someone else's life entirely. Her voice rose sharply, cracking with stress. "Of course it's your problem. He's your son, for God's sake. And I'm his father," I said quietly, but with steel underneath. A father who was told to stay home and watch his own son's wedding from a computer screen, like I'm some casual acquaintance who doesn't really matter, like I'm nobody special. She ran her hands through her hair roughly, visibly agitated, starting to pace again. "You always do this," she said, her voice climbing higher. "You always make everything about yourself. You turn every situation into some drama where you're the victim." And that was it. That was a precise moment something inside me that had been bending for 25 years finally snapped clean through. "Get out of my house," I said. The words came out quiet, but absolute. "What?" Her eyes went wide with shock. "You heard me. Amanda, get out. Right now." "Dad," she started, taking a step toward me. "No," I said, my voice firm but not loud, control but final. "I have given everything I had for 25 years. Every penny, every weekend, every birthday, every dream I ever had for myself. And I am done being painted as a villain in a story I wrote entirely with love and sacrifice. I'm done being the bad guy because I finally set a boundary." Amanda stood there for a long moment, staring at me like she'd never seen me before in her life, like I was a complete stranger wearing her father's face. Then she grabbed her purse from where she dropped it, turned sharply on her heel, and walked out. The door clicked shut behind her quietly, softly, but somehow it felt louder than any slam could have been. I stood alone in the middle of my living room, my heart pounding hard against my ribs, and realized something absolutely startling, something that felt almost like a revelation. I didn't feel guilty, not even a little bit. I felt free. The next morning, I woke up early to 43 missed calls on my phone when I turned it back on. There was a seemingly endless string of frantic messages from Tyler, each one more desperate than the last. They started with passive-aggressive attempts at guilt. "Dad, we really need to talk. Why are you doing this to us? This is childish behavior. This isn't like you." Then the tone shifted dramatically as reality apparently set in. "The venue just called. The payment didn't go through. We're going to lose everything if we don't pay by close of business tomorrow. Jessica's parents are absolutely furious. They're saying this proves they were right about you all along, that you're unreliable and manipulative. At 3:24 in the morning, He'd sent one that just said, "I don't understand why you're doing this to me. Why you want to hurt me like this?" I smiled grimly into my coffee mug as I read through them all. Of course he didn't understand. Tyler had grown up with my sacrifices woven so completely and seamlessly into the fabric of his entire life that he'd never stopped to question where any of it came from, where the comfort originated, where the security and stability materialized from. He just assumed it would always be there, eternal and unchanging. That I would always be there, wallet open, arms wide, asking no questions and expecting nothing in return. But not this time. Not anymore. Those days were over. Later that morning, while I was sitting at my desk reviewing supplier contracts and trying to focus on actual work, an email notification popped up in my personal inbox. The subject line read, "Please don't ruin my wedding." I opened it without any expectations left, all my illusions thoroughly shattered by this point. Richard, Tyler had written, and even through email I could hear the desperation bleeding through every word. "I know you're upset about the Livestream situation, and I get that, I really do, but this is extreme. This is too far. We've already lost the venue deposit, and if we can't pay the remaining balance by end of business today, Arizona time, we lose the caterer too, and the photographer, and basically everything. Jessica's parents are beyond upset. They're saying this proves you can't be reasoned with, that you're vindictive. Please don't do this to us. We can talk about you attending the ceremony in person. We can figure something out, but we desperately need those funds transferred first. Today, please." There was, spelled out in black and white, crystal clear. They were suddenly willing to talk about letting me attend now that the money had vanished into thin air. Not a genuine apology. Not any real reflection or acknowledgement of how they'd treated me. Just a frantic negotiation. As if my presence at my own son's wedding was something that could be bartered over or traded or sold to the highest bidder, depending on how generous I was feeling on any particular day. As if I was a commodity instead of a human being, instead of his father. I didn't respond to that email. I just closed it and turned back to my work, to the contracts that needed reviewing and the orders that needed processing. Around noon, my boss even stopped by my desk again. "Lunch," he offered with a friendly smile. "That new Italian place just opened up on 7th Street. Everyone's been raving about their pasta." I almost declined automatically, like I usually did, like I'd done for years. But something fundamental had shifted in me over the past 48 hours. Maybe it was a clarity that comes from finally standing up for yourself. Maybe I just desperately needed to sit somewhere that didn't ask anything from me, didn't demand pieces of my soul. So I nodded. "I'd really like that," I said, and I meant it. Over a plate of fettuccine and glasses of red wine. Stephen told me about his grandkids, about how exhausting but beautiful it was to chase after them at the park every weekend, how they made him feel young and old at the exact same time. His eyes were soft when he talked about them, present and genuine. He paused with his fork halfway at his mouth and said gently, looking at me with real concern, "Forgive me for saying so, Richard, but you seem different today. Lighter somehow, despite everything, like some weight's been lifted." I surprised myself completely by telling him absolutely everything. About Tyler and Jessica, about the email that had started this whole mess, about the wedding I'd been uninvited from, about the $70,000 I'd already spent and the $50,000 I'd been about to send, about what I'd done at the bank. When I finished, when all the words had finally spilled out, he didn't judge me or lecture me. He didn't try to fix anything or offer empty platitudes. He just reached across the table and briefly squeezed my hand with surprising strength. "Sometimes the hardest part of loving someone," he said quietly, "is setting boundaries with them, especially with the people we've given the absolute most to, the ones who've taken the biggest pieces of us. I think you did exactly what you needed to do. I think you did the right thing." For the first time in what felt like forever, for the first time in 25 long years, I actually believe that might be true. I believe that maybe, just maybe, I hadn't made a terrible mistake. Maybe I'd finally done something right for myself. When I returned to my desk after lunch, there were more calls waiting, more desperate text messages from both Tyler and Amanda, but I didn't answer any of them. I didn't need any more, because for the first time in my entire adult life, my silence was finally speaking volumes. My absence was saying everything my words never could. That evening, as I pulled into my driveway, the sky was already dimming to that particular shade of purple-blue that Texas gets right before full dark. My porch light clicked on automatically, triggered by the fading daylight. Everything looked still and peaceful and ordinary, like nothing in the world had changed. But there was someone sitting on my front steps, waiting for me. As I got closer, walking up the driveway with my briefcase in hand, I recognized her immediately. Sophia. She stood up quickly when she saw me, brushing invisible lint from her coat with nervous hands. Sophia had been Tyler's best friend since 5th grade, back when they were both gap-toothed kids more interested in video games than anything serious. She'd spent countless weekends at our house over the years, baking cookies with Sarah before she died, watching movies with us on Friday nights, giggling in sleeping bags during sleepovers that lasted until dawn. She'd been there through Sarah's funeral, crying almost as hard as my kids had. I hadn't seen her in probably 3 years, not since she'd moved to Dallas for work. Mr. Donovan, she said softly, apologetically, I'm so sorry to just drop by like this without calling first. I know it's weird. It's fine, I replied, meaning it, unlocking my front door. Would you like some coffee? Or tea? She followed me into the kitchen silently, her eyes scanning the familiar walls and counters like they held echoes of old memories she'd almost forgotten. I filled the kettle with water and set on the stove to boil, then waited in the comfortable silence. Tyler sent you, I finally said. It wasn't really a question because I already knew the answer. She didn't respond right away, just stood there fidgeting with the sleeves of her coat. Then quietly, almost whispering, she said, he's a complete mess. They lost the venue. The florist dropped out entirely. Jessica's parents are threatening to cancel the whole wedding. Her family's pulling their financial support. I said nothing at all, just placed 2 ceramic mugs on the counter carefully, precisely. She's panicking too, Sophia continued, rushing to fill the silence. Jessica, she knows she messed up badly. She just doesn't know how to fix it now. Doesn't know what to say or do. Is that why you're here? I asked, keeping my voice neutral and calm. To help them fix it? To convince me to write another check? She shook her head quickly, emphatically. No, she said. I'm here to ask you something honestly. Is there anything Tyler or Jessica can say or do at this point to change your mind? Anything at all? I paused for a long moment, really thinking about her question instead of just responding automatically. Was there? Would an apology actually change the way it felt to be excluded like I didn't matter? To be used like a bank account with no feelings attached? To be told in writing that I wasn't welcome at one of the most important moments of my son's life unless I was watching through a screen like some stranger? I looked at Sophia, still young, still hopeful that everything could be fixed with the right words. No, I said quietly but firmly. There isn't. Nothing they could say would change this. Her shoulders sagged with visible disappointment. Not even if Tyler apologizes. Not even if they both get down on their knees and beg. I handed her a mug of hot tea, steam rising between us. Word are easy, Sophia, I said gently, especially when people are desperate and scared. But the people who genuinely love you, who really see you as a person, they don't wait until you cut them off financially to actually see you. They don't wait until the money's gone to realize you matter. Sophia looked down into her tea for a long moment, nodding slowly like something was finally making sense to her. I get it, she said eventually, even if Tyler doesn't, even if he never does. I'm sorry, Mr. Donovan. I'm sorry this happened to you. You don't need to be sorry, I replied honestly. You didn't do anything wrong. We stood there in my kitchen in silence for another minute. 2 people from completely different generations, somehow connected by one hard truth that cuts across all ages. Sometimes love has real limits. Sometimes boundaries are necessary. Sometimes the only way to be truly seen is to walk away from people who refuse to see you. Sophia didn't stay long after that. She didn't try to argue or negotiate or convince me. She just thanked me quietly for the tea, gave me a gentle hug that reminded me achingly of Sarah, and walked back out into the night. And I finally closed the door, really closed it, on a version of myself that I had long since outgrown, a version that had died somewhere along the way without me even noticing. The wedding never happened, not as they'd originally planned it anyway. According to what I heard later through Amanda, they scrambled desperately to find another venue, but everything decent was either already booked solid or far too expensive without the money I had once promised them. Tyler tried to negotiate with the original venue, tried to work out some kind of payment plan, but they refused to work with him after canceled wire transfer. They'd already had to turn away another wedding to hold the date for Tyler and Jessica. According to Amanda, who eventually started speaking to me again months later, Tyler and Jessica ended up doing a very small backyard ceremony about 6 weeks after the original date, just Jessica's immediate family and a handful of Tyler's closest friends. Sophia was there. She told me. It rained. I wasn't invited to that ceremony either. And this time, surprisingly, I didn't need to be. I didn't even want to be anymore. That door had closed permanently. In the weeks and months that followed that Monday email, Tyler sent me one more long message, a rambling email that arrived late one night. It was emotional and raw, half genuine apology and half desperate justification for their choices. He said he understood now why I was hurt. He said Jessica felt terrible about how she'd handled things. He said they both made mistakes and wanted to make things right. I read it once, slowly and carefully, then archived it without responding. I wasn't angry anymore by that point. I wasn't hurt or bitter. I was just done. Completely and utterly done with that chapter of my life. There's a strange kind of peace that comes with truly letting go of something. And I don't mean letting go in rage or spite, but in absolute clarity. It's like finally setting down a heavy weight you didn't even realize was crushing you until it was gone. For the first time in literal decades, I started waking up in the morning not immediately wondering who needed something from me, not bracing myself for another guilt trip carefully disguised as love and family obligation. I made a new rule for myself, wrote it down and taped it to my bathroom mirror, where I'd see it every single day. If my presence is negotiable, then so is my effort. If people can't value me for who I am, they don't get to benefit from what I can give. I started actually living my own life instead of existing in the margins of everyone else's. I went to work, did my job well, came home. I started reading novels again, something I hadn't done since before Sarah died. I joined a woodworking class at the community center on Thursday evenings and discovered I was actually pretty good at it. I started having dinner regularly with friends and colleagues who genuinely saw me as a person, not just as an ATM machine or an emotional support system. People who value my company for its own sake. And slowly, gradually, I learned something I wish someone had taught me 30 years earlier. You don't have to burn yourself alive to keep other people warm. You don't have to sacrifice everything that makes you who you are just to prove you love someone. Amanda eventually came around after about 4 months of silence between us. She showed up at my door one Saturday afternoon without warning. No phone call or text message first. When I opened the door, she just stood there crying. Really crying, not the angry, frustrated tears from before, but deep, genuine sobs. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry, Dad. I didn't understand. I didn't see what they were doing to you, what I was doing to you too." We held each other on my front porch for a long time while she cried and apologized. I forgave her. Of course I did. But things were different between us after that, and we both knew it. There was a new boundary there now, invisible but absolutely real. She knew she couldn't just take anymore. She had to give too. She had to see me as a person with limits. Tyler, on the other hand, I haven't spoken to in over a year now. He sends occasional text messages on holidays, awkward attempts at reaching out. "Happy Thanksgiving, Dad. Merry Christmas. Hope you're doing well." I usually respond with something brief and polite. "Thanks, same to you." But we haven't had a real conversation, haven't seen each other face to face. I don't know if we ever will again, and I've made peace with that possibility. Sometimes the cost of standing up for yourself is losing people you love. Sometimes that's just how it has to be. And as much as it hurts, as much as there's still a Tyler-shaped hole in my heart, I know I did the right thing. I know I finally chose myself after spending 25 years choosing everyone else first. I think about that email sometimes. Jessica's email with its casual cruelty and that dismissive LOL at the end. I think about how one moment, one decision, can change absolutely everything. How years of sacrifice could be undone by a single act of disrespect. And I realize now that it wasn't really about the money at all. Even though the money was significant, it was about being seen. It was about being valued for more than what I could provide materially. It was about being treated like a human being instead of a resource to be exploited. These days, I wake up and make my coffee slowly, savoring it instead of gulping it down before rushing off to solve someone else's crisis. I sit on my back porch in the early morning light and listen to the birds singing their territorial songs. I work on my woodworking projects in the garage on weekends, creating beautiful things with my own two hands just for the sake of creating them. I have dinner with Steven and his wife sometimes. Genuine friendship without any ulterior motives or hidden agendas. I've even started planning that Alaska trip I postponed for so many years, looking at cruise options and hiking trails. Maybe next summer I'll actually go. Maybe I'll finally do something just for myself. And here's what I want you to understand. What I need you to hear if you're going through something similar. Setting boundaries with people you love isn't cruel. It isn't selfish. It isn't punishment. It's self-preservation. It's recognizing that you matter too, that your feelings and your dignity and your self-respect are just as important as anyone else's. It's understanding that love without respect isn't really love at all. It's just exploitation wearing a family mask. You don't owe anyone unlimited access to your resources, your time, your energy, or your heart, not even your own children. Especially not when they've made it clear that they only value what you can give them, not who you actually are. If my story resonated with you, if you felt that same sting of being taken for granted by the people who should value you most, I want you to know you're not alone. Share this story. Talk about it. Don't be afraid to set those boundaries you know you need. And please, subscribe to this channel and leave a comment about your own experiences. Your story matters. Your voice matters. Sometimes we all need to hear that we're not crazy for wanting basic respect and dignity from the people we love most. Sometimes the strongest kind of love, the most powerful kind, is finally the love you give to yourself. The love that says I matter too. I deserve